65 days ago, approximately, I hopped on a plane. I left my kids, my family in Europe, because I was in Europe. And I took a flight from Dublin to London. Then I took a London flight overnight to Abuja, and I landed here at 4 a.m. I love to tell this story because this is the part everybody sees and admired, but I think I was in a different place when I made that decision because I had spent 2 decades plus working for multinationals, traveling around. I was becoming restless, and I was seeking impact. Now, I did say yes. That's why I'm there, isn't it? But this is me. I think that was 30 years ago. That's 1994, 98, something around then. And that was when I decided to be an intern at NEPA. We know NEPA, the nation's utility company. Now it's AEDC and all the other discos, but it was NEPA. And after that internship, 3 months, I promised myself I would never work for the public sector. So for most of my 3 months, my job was to move around fabric in the office, move around, just do menial jobs. I was more like the office assistant as required. As a student studying engineering, I was really craving to get into the nit of it. I really wanted to do some engineering. That's why I came. But I was fortunate because I met that guy. His name is Engineer Abba. That's what I called him. He was the first person that gave me an opportunity to even come close to whatever is engineering in NEPA. And he convinced me even after that, when I came at my 4th year to do internship, to work with him at a company called Microtech, then in Lagos, Apapa. But I already promised myself. So you ask me, if you had promised yourself never to work in public sector, why did you say yes? I thought the first thing to set the bar, to frame it properly, is to warn you. If you're ever thinking of coming to the public sector, I think you should be really clear about what your core values are. I feel like every day I am fighting for my soul. Yes. Every day I am fighting to ensure that my core, I am true to it. But I think it's easier if you know what your core is. Then it's easier. You understand? Just like the quote says, if you know what you're actually doing, so what's that why? Then you can actually bear anyhow. You can bear it because in the public sector was the first time ever in my life I got to send a memo. Who knows what a memo is? Now, I was coming from an industry where we send emails. And now I got into an industry where I send memos. So it was an interesting perspective. So that's where I was coming from. I was working for companies where we thought mental health was important. We shouldn't call people after 5 p.m. We don't want to disrupt their family life. We thought it was important to take care of your body, your soul. We cared about so many things. We wanted to change the world. And I came into a world where the reality was different. Like I said, I realized people would send me a memo to tell me about the next memo they want to send me about taking an action. And I thought it was strange. Why don't you just send me a memo telling me about this action we're going to take? I used to go home an average day with like piles and piles of files because nobody thought about being paperless. Everybody thought everything had to be signed on paper and written on paper. So I wanted to show a picture of my room on my early days. You see like a stacked load of files because I had to take them home because they have to be signed and brought in. But that was interesting because I learned, like I told you, 4 things I learned I want to share. We're only blind as we want to be. I think it's good to accept your reality, and that's one of the things I had to learn to do. That this is how these things have been done. Doesn't mean it has to be done that way, but you have to come from the point of view that this is how they've done it for a long time. So don't start shooting from both hip, if you get me. It's good to accept that this is the reality, then what do we do about it? Because I have been in situations where, you know what happens with memos? They get missing, they can get edited, or, all kinds of things happen to memos, compared to where if it was email, those things don't happen. And I thought it was interesting also the decision-making in public sector. Now I'm sharing with you some of the things I have learned. Decision-making is quite interesting. To send a memo to me, an average memo goes through 5 layers to get to me. And that's just a memo to tell me about the next memo they're going to send me. And I will phrase this because sometime early last year, my organization was, NIGCOMSAT, was, so we had access to some kind of governmental funding, and it was retrieved or taken back. And one of the things I struggled with was how to get back the access. So you have to go to stakeholders and create a case why you had to get it back. So I was really exposed to public sector, procedures and policies. I don't think I've been that schooled. I have come to respect people in public sector, especially when it comes to policy. Second thing that has really helped me cope in this past 1 year is change versus continuity. You have to decide that you cannot change the entire world. So I cannot change the organization. So you have to decide what do you want to change and what must continue. And I say this with tongue in cheek. So there's some things you would love to change, but you might never get to change. And there's some things you like to continue, but you might never get the resources to enable them continue. So there comes in prioritization. So let's go back to my memo story, isn't it? It was clear to me that those memos, we got to work on them. It can't take 20 days to write me a memo to tell me that you want the company to procure something. And then you come back and send me another memo to tell me the cost of what should be procured. What was easily needed was an ERP system where people could do it online and we could all have access to it and we could approve. Because I found out there were so many things, and it was interesting because when I say some things you cannot change, so even though I could change within my organization, externally it was also tough. So we got to a point where even though we could automate and make it digital, when we had like auditors or all come, they told me it doesn't apply if it's not on paper. So they want you to reprint them and re-sign them. So you have to decide what you could change and what could continue. There's some great things that could continue being public sector. It is so structured that I think they've made it in a way that it is created in a way that we can put stability in the system. You know, coming from more like a startup type ecosystem where things change it. Public sector was created in a way that you can have stability for a long time. So most times when people are quoting policies and procedures for me, you'll be shocked this thing was written in 1998. But yes, that's how far gone it goes. So what it brings to mind is something I have seen when it comes to change and opportunities. So while I was in the tech media company in Meta, the sector called, we call them e-commerce. Everyone knows e-commerce. So you can imagine yesterday would have been a kill, Black Friday. Oh my God, that's the kill for us. So e-commerce was growing at a ridiculous rate, 70% year on year. Then post-COVID, when I joined, it started to slow down. The interesting thing about change. And we were struggling to understand how to adapt our business models to that. Because one of the things we found out is that consumers' behavior had changed. So traditionally, what people would do before post-COVID is that you go to a store, most people, and you shop, isn't it? You try on the outfit, then you buy. But we realized that during COVID, most people were doing more online shopping. And I think people started getting used to online shopping. So post-COVID, that e-commerce sector began to tank until we realized that what had just happened is that behaviors had changed. So what would happen is that people will go to a store, they will wear the outfit, they don't buy it, they just test it. Then they go home and they shop. Same person, just a different behavior. And that's the interesting thing about change. So when you're trying to create change, most times you're trying to understand your audience or your market. What will be win-win for both of you? And that's one of the things I have realized working in the public sector. What you're looking for is what is win-win for you and win-win for the people that work with you. Not entirely coming to say I'm coming to save the world because I'm coming from the private sector and I know how it can be done. And that's how I've framed some of the challenges I've had. How can we look at how the system brought us here? How can we look at the structure that we are running? How can we look at the process that is maintaining it? And how can we make it for good? I think if you go with that frame of mind, you'll probably live longer. If you don't, you think that everybody is against you because it feels like that some days. So you tend to see that in some of these challenges is where I find opportunity. And what I've realized with finding opportunity in it is that then when you create solutions, it's not just for you. That's how you create impact. It becomes nationwide. Sometimes the solutions become regional. Because now when we go to this conference, as we share some of the solutions we have been able to create, and sometimes even new product lines, but it was out of a challenge we have. People are amazed. But that's how life works sometimes. It's also your viewpoint. I have realized that what you want to do as a leader is be ahead by thinking a step ahead. And that's the story of Joseph. Now, the part of the story that I really like is there's a part of the story where Joseph goes to finds himself in the palace as like a COO or chief operating officer, and then he had to interpret this dream. That's how he made the role. But he was given a dream to interpret. The interesting thing about him interpreting the dream is not him painting the context of what the dream means. He actually was asked to prefer a solution, and he gave a solution. And in very simple terms, what he said is that you prepare for the day of darkness in the day of light, isn't it? So it's in the good times you prepare for the tough times. And that's one of the things that has kept me going. You want to create a sector, an organization that is way ahead of its time. And I put it in simple terms. A lot of people come and say public sector is corrupt. Public sector is, there's so many negative connotations to public sector. Now, I am not contesting that. What I'm saying is that when we do have an opportunity to take a chance, what you want to create is an organization or a structure that way after you have gone, it is very difficult to point holes at it. It is very difficult to destroy that structure. What I tell my team is that I want to create an organization for you. That's why I'm seeking that we work together, that way after I've gone, if somebody else comes and decides to destroy it, you would even fight for it. That is what I seek. When I got the appointment, like 365 days ago, somebody tweeted that it was important we put square pegs in square holes. So he was referring to my appointment. But today, I am actually putting it to you as a possible reframe of how we see public sector. A lot of us in this room are we shy away from public sector, and it's okay because of all the things we've heard. But the truth is that for a low-income country like Nigeria, in terms of public sector to GDP capital is 3.6. That means what do? That means we have about fewer people in the public sector compared to our GDP capital. In countries like in the Middle East, it's 25. In very advanced nation, is 16. What does it mean? You have fewer people in the public sector. But the interesting fact is that the public sector is what really influences most of the things we do. The policies that drive your sector is coming from the public sector. Most of our market services in very low-income countries like ours is coming from the public sector because most times it's the governments that are owning the manufacturing company, large-scale sectors like mine is driven by the government. Yet, we don't have square pegs in square holes because we've left it to go for the private sector where we believe we can be free to do, compared to the public sector where we feel is restricted. So why I'm here today is to propose to you, could you consider if in the next 5-10 years you were the one that got this call? Could you consider probably to say yes to that opportunity? I strongly believe that's one of the reasons I took the role. I've always said I have taken things that challenge me, not just because I want to do them, but because it might be an opportunity that is also for someone consider to take that direction. Because when I look at what we've achieved in the past 1 year, I think the simple question I keep asking myself, why don't we have more people like Jane in the public sector? Thank you.